the stand is everyone.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for inviting me to take part. It's been a wonderful 3 days, quite an experience. I'm really glad I came. What I'm going to do is focus just on co-designing. I'll start with some frameworks that I've developed in my own work, and then I have a segment on what we did at Workchops towards the end as well. Most of my work has been in practice. And my practice has been working on design and co-design projects with clients in industry, in all industries over the years. About 4 years ago, I took a full-time academic position at The Ohio State University. So now I mostly teach and do a lot fewer projects. So I want to start with defining what I mean by design and co-design, just so you get a feel for where I'm coming from. I see design as an inquiry into the future situation of use. So that's quite broad. Design isn't about stuff. Design is about futures, and it's about people's experiences in the future. Going right along with that, then, co-designing is the collaborative exploration of future situations of use. Whoa, I'm sorry, something's missing here. Oh no. Ah, okay, there it is, there's the squiggle. This is a picture I draw of the design and development process. So traditionally, design started with an RFP, a request for proposal from the client, and it went through an iterative process of exploration. And then something was delivered to the marketplace. The front end of design, which has grown up in the last, say, 15, 20 years for the most part, is an area of exploration of what should be designed. Co-design can take place at any of those phases. Most of my work has been focused on the front end of design, where I think the need to bring various types of people together, collaboratively exploring future situations of use, is particularly crucial. Now, if you take those stages, pre-design, discover, design, market, sell, and so forth, I've put the process along the bottom, and now I've made sort of a landscape looking at different levels of value that co-design can bring. So at the top, there's a monetary level. Co-design can help organizations make money. At the middle, the value in the middle level is use or experience. The use of co-design can help the client organization develop products, services that work better for people. And at the third level then is at the level of society, or using co-design to help make people's lives better, to really get at a much deeper, level of involvement. And what I did some years back was I just Googled co-design and looked at what companies were saying about themselves as co-designers. So through Google, all of these companies came up as doing co-design, and then analyzed what were they saying they were doing. And I think that you can see a pattern here. And I've described the pattern in this way, that organizations that apply co-design sort of after design, when things are going to market or being sold, tend to be using it at the monetary level. They're using co-design to make money. They're using it to draw attention to the organization, to make themselves, I think, look cool. They're using it to sort of let people name a Doritos chip. Seriously, that's what's going on there. Their Frito-Lay is co-designing by making a contest for you to name something that's already been designed and developed and is ready to make it to the marketplace. But that's, especially in the United States, that's what co-design is about. Co-designing, so in that sense, co-designing is it's a collection of tools and techniques. You just apply it whenever. And when you're applying it at the end of the process, there is a monetary level, but you may not reach the other levels of value for co-designing. When you're applying it during design, you're probably using it more as a set of methods or an approach. And you may only apply it during the design phase, but it does then impact the experience or the use value of the product or service. Co-designing as a mindset characterizes those organizations that were applying it very, very early, like before the design, applying it in order to figure out what to design. And so we see these different, this is all co-design. I think that you can make your own opinions about what level of value you find to have the most value to you. But the fact is that all of these are out there, all of them are relevant. And I've learned in my practice of working with organizations and bringing co-design to them, often for the first time, that it's very difficult to go into an organization that's been doing things as experts and designing for people. It's hard to get them out of that mindset. And in fact, I spent 5 years in an architectural firm working very hard to bring co-design to that organization. And this diagram came as a result of that, because I found people would look at what we were doing and they'd be interested, and then they would say, "Oh, could you give me that toolkit? Do you sell the toolkits? If you could make me a toolkit, I want to use it in my meeting." Which sort of told me they really didn't understand that it wasn't a toolkit, and it wasn't something that you could necessarily just apply, and that it needed to be designed for that case. And so this represents a lot of different projects, a lot of learning, that in order to apply co-design at a deeper level, at the sort of societal level, we need to look not only at the tools, but how the tools are used in methods, how the methods are put together in a sequence, and then more importantly than that, with what mindset are these tools and methods applied. The key requirement here is that I'm not sure that you can practice co-design unless you have the mindset where you believe that all people are creative. That's, to me, like the single most important ingredient of a good co-designer. Whoops. And then culture is sort of the ultimate level. So integrating co-design into an organization is it's difficult unless you come into an organization that already has the mindset and the culture for it. And I sense that there's something going on in New Zealand where people are coming. They are entering this at the level of mindset and culture, and that makes for a very unique situation that you should really acknowledge and be proud of, because it's hard when you're coming in from the top to get to those levels of value. Okay, obviously you can see that my sort of, in terms of this. Whoops, I'm sorry, I'm going backwards. In terms of this map, I place a lot of value in the lower left-hand corner. Okay, I acknowledge that these are all relevant, but I do think that the earlier you apply it, and for the means of improving people's lives, that's when the true value of co-designing really takes hold. Just a few words about creativity because of the importance of collective creativity as a component of co-designing. Now, most of what we know about creativity is about individual creativity, and most of it comes from psychological studies of eminently creative people. So that doesn't really help us a lot when we're trying to understand everyday people's creativity, and it doesn't really help us when we're trying to understand people being creative together with each other. And so I've further explored, what's been going on in creativity, and it has been, the interest in it has been growing. The research has been getting a lot more interesting, and we do have, there's evidence, peer-reviewed articles looking at the role of emotion in creative behavior, and with a lot of findings that show positive emotional states lead to increased creativity. There's also research now on the role of the body in creative activity and creative behavior, and the fact is that when you're up and moving, you're walking or you're acting or you're moving in relation to other people, that impacts creativity in a positive way. And in addition, there's not as much research on this next level, but the places, the spaces, and the materials that people have when they're brought together to be creative also has a great impact on creativity. So this is something important to keep in mind when you're, in co-design, encouraging people to be creative, that you really need to think about all of these things. And make sure that the head, the heart, the body, and the place is right for that creative behavior. Now, brainstorming is one form of collective creativity. And using the diagrammatic language, brainstorming looks like this. And so you have individuals having these ideas, and then you have the ideas smashing up against other ideas and generating new ideas, and what you end up with is like a lot of ideas. And then the question is, well, what do you do? How do you know which are the good ideas? How do you sort those out? How do you prioritize? And so what I work towards in co-designing is a state that looks more like this. And so here we have the individuals, but now they're close. Like they may have revealed some personal stories about themselves. They may be physically close, touching, but they're connected in ways that they weren't before, and the result is that the ideas are really big. And groups of people in this relationship to each other can solve really complex problems and generate ideas about the future. Now, the ideal situation then is this one where each person is very different from the other people. So they may come from different cultures, backgrounds, disciplines, age groups, and so forth. But when you have a very wide mix of people collaborating in this way, the ideas are huge, are really big. So this is a transdisciplinary type situation. What I want to do now is just briefly touch on what I've described as 3 slices in time. And roughly, there's about a 30-year time period between the stage of designing, co-designing, and what I'm calling collective dreaming. Another way to describe these 3 slices is designing could be characterized as designing for people, which is the traditional model, the designer's the expert, designing for people. Co-designing is designing with people. And collective dreaming is designing by people. Okay? Now, this is the same language that Andrea's used, but I think you'll see when I describe it, I'm using it in an entirely different way, the designing by people. And hopefully hopefully you'll see that, and if not, ask questions. Because I see designing by people as being in the future, and definitely a positive view of that future. So back in the early 1984, basically what happened, and I was practicing at that time in a design firm, and designers didn't really explore what to design. They explored how to design what the client asked for. And the innovation at that time was in the hands of the client, and innovation tended to be technology-driven or market-driven. Designers would always sort of try to step back from the RFP and ask questions. They always tried to move it into the front end a bit, but basically that's how design worked. And I think what was going on there was that design was about giving shape to the future. And so the design started with the RFP, which is the red dot that said, we want you to make this for these people. And what's happened, the situation today in design, which is the state of co-designing then, is we now have interdisciplinary teams. They're responsible for design at multiple levels of scale. And designers and design researchers are being asked to explore what to design, as well as how to design it. But the front end is really about, well, what should we design? And designers are learning the skills that are needed to act as facilitators of the collective creativity of others. Okay? This is a very touchy subject I've found in design schools. And not all design faculty see this as exciting and a positive step for the future. A lot of the students are very eager to give it a try. And so what we see today then is designers and design researchers are learning how to make sure that what is designed makes sense in people's future lives. And so this part of the bubble where the focus is now, I call making sense of the future. And we need both. And we need people focused on making sense of the future. We need designers and design researchers on both sides of this equation. Moving then into the farthest out, the collective dreaming, or the designing by people. I don't have pictures of it, but I do have some well, I do, but I'm going to show Workchops pictures instead. So collective dreaming, what will it be like? Well, in this time, everybody designs. Everybody designs as a collective activity. And I see that collective dreaming is a space where people can tell future stories collaboratively, they can visualize future scenarios collectively, and enact future scenarios together with others. So what we're doing in this state is finding new ways to give shape to the future. Okay, the people, not the designers, the people are giving shape to the future so that they can then enter those futures and explore the consequences of those futures before the future gets here. Which raises the question of, well, who will provide the tools and the materials? Who will set the stage for those people to use in order to collectively imagine the futures together? And I believe that it's the role of designers, design researchers, who are now learning to be the facilitators of collective creativity. I believe their role in the future will be creating these collective dreaming spaces where regular people, ordinary people, can come and imagine these spaces. So in design by people, this isn't just people randomly designing things. This is facilitated by designers who have learned to use their creative abilities to facilitate the collective creativity of others. And we can, I believe we can start to look towards this state even today. We have technology that is almost ready to let this happen in terms of the creation of virtual immersive environments where people can work in this way. And so this isn't a situation where the designers are creating these futures for people to engage in, but the situation, say 30 years from now, where the people are creating these spaces, using them, modifying them, living them, and understanding then the consequences of their future decisions. So this is a map just focusing on what's happened to, this was a picture I made of design in 10 years ago, just mapping out what was going on. And so over the last 10 years, we've had, so time is going out this way. We've seen an explosion of new design domains, service design, social design, transition design, transformation design, user interaction, embodied interaction, design interventions, critical designs, design fiction, speculative design is another, is related to design fiction. And so they're pointing out in different directions, and we see that some of them are more focused on improving future situations of use, some of them on engaging people for maybe learning, entertainment, and some for provoking people in order to get them to think about themselves or to think about the future. And so it's the blue ring on that outer edges expanding out in time that I think this is where the collective dreaming resides. And I don't know what those bubbles will be there, but they're out there and will emerge soon. So with Workchops, this was our agenda. It was packed. It was well planned. It was incredibly immersive, fun. We were well fed. You could, after dinner, you could kick off right after dinner and get a good night's sleep. But basically, we were busy for 2.5, over all 3 days, I guess. I led the workshop on co-design. Okay, so we focused on co-design. I shared these frameworks for understanding experience. You want to explore what people do, what they say, and use materials to let people make things so that they could express how they feel about an experience, what they know, what they understand. So step 1 could be understanding experience. Step 2 would be exploring future experience. A similar framework, but a much more active sequence of making, telling, and enacting. So making artifacts, enacting their use in as personas or in scenarios, and then telling stories about the future. So the participants were pretty much thrown in with this was quite deliberate, with frameworks, but not a lot. There wasn't, say, a process or rules or whatever. We had experienced practitioners, so the idea was, okay, throw them in, get them going. So the first thing we did was figure out what are we going to work on for the next few days. We had communicated over Slack in the months before Workchops and identified some sort of areas that people were interested in. So we clustered those to figure out sort of, what were the areas, what were the areas that we could explore. and who wanted to do what. So the green circles represent people who had experience in a certain area. The blue circles represented where they wanted to go during workshops. So one thing you could see, there's a lot of green circles on the right around things like service design, co-design lean UX, co-design business propositions, strategic workshops, and mainstream co-design. So a lot of people were doing that. And they wanted to do something different. And we got in, through that exercise then, people self-selected sort of which of those bubbles they wanted to be on based on how much of a risk they wanted to take or what area they wanted to explore. And so we had 4 teams with 4 humongous topics. These are the starting points. Not all the teams ended where they started, but they all came together over a shared interest. And the way it worked was each team generated a workshop plan for another team in the afternoon of Monday. Tuesday morning, each team executed their plan on another team. So every person was both the facilitator of their topic, but then they also became the participants on somebody else's topic. Okay, so everybody had both experiences, and that led to a very productive reflection after these workshops took place. We had lots of materials for embodying and visualizing. I brought some, Chris brought some. There was lots. The materials were available. Some of the people started using them even in the planning stages. So just some shots. Here is, this is the planning. Like, what are we going to do with our topic? How are we going to approach it? In 3 hours, the teams basically took their very large topic, narrowed it down, and created a plan, which is quite impressive. So again, just taking a look at some of the different ways people worked in planning. The materials on the table, sometimes it got to be a big mess with stuff, but just bringing the materials and using them in the space, the materials then started to inspire and modify and change the planning process. And then the execution of the execution of the 4 projects. So in this, these are the participants getting into the roles that they had been assigned. And they weren't just assigned the roles, they were asked to create a musical instrument and then make a performance based on those. So again, immersing them into a playful mood before inviting them to play a game where they explored from their 3 personas of the community person, the business person, and the government person. Is that right? So the players played the game from their personas. And this is the start of game. And the game was fully developed and worked out to the extent that it was actually playable. This is an artifact of one of the groups chose to work on speculative design. And this is just a glimpse of the future in a dystopic scenario. Using space, like big space outdoors to create a journey. The whole session then took place along this path with activities outlined at each stage to the final step where the participants were engaged in a collective dreaming type exercise. So a lot of, full body enactment and moving in some of the teams. The materials then, I think in all of the teams, played various roles, whether that, I think in this case, it was sort of summarizing the learnings from the activity as individuals. So that just gives you sort of a glimpse. I know we're going to hear from some of the teams, but gives you a glimpse of sort of what was accomplished. And so my last few slides just summarize some of what people shared, and then my observations on what the next steps are for next practice here in New Zealand. One of the participants said, "I learned more from being a participant than I did from being a facilitator." I thought this was really a significant statement, and I think that actually the awareness of designing things from the participant's point of view was an insight that a number of people took away. Removing the rails enables more creativity, which leads to more engagement. The more planned your activity, sometimes too much planning gets in the way. And when you let go and sort of trust the situation to turn out, the lack of sort of control over the situation is very scary, but very positive. And people were given the opportunity here to do that, to try that on each other. Enacting around an artifact gives so much more meaning to the insight. So the building of the stuff with the materials gave shape to insights that couldn't have been done otherwise. And then on some team, the artifacts were used in the enactment as well. Playful making is super immersive. Immersive is a good quality in a co-design process. They learned to be wary of the power balance as a facilitator. Okay, one team focused on power imbalances in co-design, coming away with the realization that the facilitator can also can have power issues with the participants. My conclusions, just some thoughts I had for next practice are these, that I think that expanding your breadth of tools, methods, and tools, techniques, and methods for co-designing is an obvious first step. One thing that I shared in the last session is an approach that I've taken to explore new methods is whenever I'm working with the client, I'll mostly use methods that I've used before, but I'll always throw like a new one in, and I don't tell them. But just throw it in and see how it goes. So you're not risking too much at one time. Expand your perspective on how far out in the future you and your co-designers explore. It seemed like a lot of the work was more about incremental change because of many constraints. But I think pushing it out to the future and then coming back to solve the more immediate problems is a strategy that needs to be explored. Put your participants in the center of the co-design planning process. Okay, if you plan it based on how they're going to go through it and what kind of experience the participants are going to have, generally the end results will be positive. So not looking at it so much from what you need to have in the end to give to your client, but making sure that the head, the heart, the body, the place and the space, all of those things are working together is there. Move towards collective dreaming. Again, looking out into the future and look for opportunities to explore collective visions and collective mapping, and to take that opportunity to use the co-designing tools and methods to play in the future. And then celebrate, for New Zealand, celebrate your position on the landscape of co-design practices. So I just took a stab at saying, I think you're there. I think you're in a really, really good position. You're in a far better position than we are in the US. Obviously, I'm a little biased towards this part of the map when I say that, but I think that that might be something you're not as aware of here, but celebrate that. And this was our checkout. That's the word for it. I thought checkout was when you turn your keys in, but this was checkout, and it was wonderful. Thank you.